When you're talking about greatest heavyweights of all time, I feel like every conversation of that question ends with Stipe Miocic. You have a lot of candidates. You have Cain Velasquez, great wrestler. You have a guy, Verdum, great BJJ, don't get me wrong. And you have Fedor, great guy, wasn't in the UFC, but I feel like if you are looking at MMA as a whole and you're looking at the resume, ends with Stipe. And that's pretty crazy to say given the fact that everyone thinks of this dude as an underdog. Every single fight he has really ever been a part of, he has been thought of as an underdog. But when you look at the resume, you have 3 title defenses, the most in heavyweight history. You have a win against Daniel Cormier, 2 wins against Daniel Cormier, where you also finished him. One of the only people to ever really finish Daniel Cormier in the fashion that he did it. I mean, he outboxed him, knocked him out. It was a very clean knockout. The ability of reading Daniel Cormier and landing those body shots to eventually get to the finish shows you how good Stipe Miocic is. And when you're looking at who he's fighting next, as the making of this recording is John Bones Jones, one of the greatest fighters we have ever laid our eyes upon. It's happening again, where Stipe is being overlooked. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this time, and I think we should address it. First off, we should talk about the age and the time off. Stipe Miocic is in his mid-40s, which obviously is not a good look if you are trying to be a top-tier athlete. When you're also fighting a guy like John Jones, mid-40s is not the greatest thing in the world. He's also coming off of a horrific loss all the way back in 2021 against Francis Ngannou, where he got completely flatlined. And I think the worst part of that knockout is that hammer fist that Francis landed at the very end. He is brutal. When he knocks people out, he like actually just wants to hurt you even more when you're unconscious. But that was the last time we've seen Stipe, and a lot has happened. I mean, champions have even changed. People weren't even in the UFC champions like Alex Pereira. It's been a while since we've seen Stipe, but we can't really talk about him in that sort of light currently because we don't know what we're going to see out of Stipe. We might have a really old man that is just trying to get a payday. We could also have the heavyweight GOAT that we have always seen. Who knows what's coming out? And I think we should talk about the best case scenario if we want to see a good fight. The heavyweight GOAT, Stipe Miocic. What made Stipe so special? I think the first thing we have to talk about is obviously that boxing, because it is crispy in this heavyweight division. It's very hard to explain what is so good about it because when initially looking at it and when you're seeing him in the middle of the octagon, it can look very stiff. Not sloppy, because I don't think it's sloppy at all. I think it's a very polished boxing style, but I do think that the snap to some of these punches are not as long or not as speedy as some other guys in the heavyweight division. I think a guy like Stipe would have a horrible fight against Tom Aspinall, a guy who darts in and out, and a guy like Cyril Gane who can really use his footwork to win fights, because Stipe's footwork, to be honest, is not the greatest. It's nothing to be wowed about. It's very simple. It's very simplistic in his ways, and that's kind of how his boxing is as well. But listen, being a basic fighter is not a bad thing. I mean, it clearly shows that it's not a bad thing, as Stipe Miocic has 14 knockouts in the heavyweight division, and they're all really clean, powerful knockouts. Especially they're good boxing. They're not sloppy, overhand heavyweight boxing, you know, the blob fights, Rebellis de Spain, stuff like that. It is a fight where Stipe makes reads and he figures out how accurate he really can be, and he lands behind the ear or in the jaw and clean knockout. Stipe is one of the more accurate heavyweights we have ever seen in this sport. When you're thinking about heavyweights, power doesn't really go away at this late age. Stipe in his mid-40s can still land with very vicious intent, and given how accurate he is, power doesn't really mean much if you're really accurate. We have seen it with guys like Conor McGregor where, yes, he was very powerful, but the timing and accuracy beats everything. It's one of his famous quotes. And that's exactly what Stipe has. Stipe has that timing and that accuracy to really land on anyone. And a guy who has really horrible boxing defense, or honestly, it's one of his worst parts to his game in John Jones, can get caught by Stipe's punches, and who knows what happens after. I would like to also talk about his wrestling, as his wrestling is a top-notch and very underrated part of his game. We have seen him defend takedowns from guys like Daniel Cormier, guys like Alistair Overeem. When he does get to the ground, because there has been times people have taken him down, he's not like he's very confused down there. It is very technical in what he does and what he maneuvers through. Stipe is no slouch in this heavyweight division. This is a guy who actually put his heart and brain and soul into MMA, and it's not just a blob. I'm sorry, it's not a heavyweight blob that we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who is 240, who actually trains every day, who is fighting a guy in John Jones who does the same exact thing. This is not a fight where Stipe is just relying on this one-hit knockout power that a lot of these heavyweights have. Stipe actually goes in there and is expecting a 25 25-minute affair. And when you want to talk about his 25-minute affair, let's just talk about his reads in general. We've seen him read guys and figure them out as the fight goes on, a la Daniel Cormier getting that 4th round knockout where you saw Stipe open up to the body and see that perfect liver punch, and he hit it around 9 to 12 times before finally landing the 1-2 slip to knock out Daniel Cormier, a guy who's only really been knocked out by Jon Jones. Going in a resume with Jon Jones is not the worst thing to have. And I feel like he's always been overlooked because of the way he talks and the way he acts. It's very, I guess, not fighter-like. I mean, he has glasses every time he walks around. Everything is very weird when you're looking at Stipe. It just doesn't look like an MMA fighter. But we're not going to talk about how much of a fucking dog this guy is. Let's talk about how he won the belt in Rio de Janeiro, went into Verdum's turf and knocks him clean while walking backwards pretty much. He barely had any power to the punch, yet it was so accurate and so pinpoint to the chin where Verdum went out immediately, and it was Rio de Janeiro quiet while Stipe was sitting there saying, "I'm the champ." Now, he did get knocked out by Francis Ngannou in his last fight, but before that, we were looking at one of the toughest chins in the heavyweight division. This guy went 25 minutes with Francis Ngannou and ate everything he could take. This guy also took punches from Daniel Cormier, who I know isn't the most powerful guy, but he does land with very vicious intent. Not to mention all the other guys in this heavyweight division who can put him out. Guys like Mark Hunt, guys like Verdum, guys like JDS, Alistair Overeem, Fabio Maldonado, Gabriel Gonzaga, Andrei Arlovsky. This is a guy who has fought the who's who of the heavyweight division and never gotten knocked out. Overall, Stipe has redefined this heavyweight division, and you're starting to see it with these younger guys coming up like Tom Aspinall, like Cyril Gane. A lot of these heavyweights are no longer blobs who are looking for the overhands. We are actually seeing these 240, 265 guys who are actual MMA guys who are looking to wrestle and box well and not just look for these one-hit knockouts. I'm starting to like what the heavyweight division is starting to be, and I think a lot of it has to do with guys like Stipe and guys in this era of Stipe who were not just blobs looking for knockouts. These were guys who were looking for an MMA fight and was looking to fight for legacy. As I've mentioned in this video, he is going up against Jon Jones in MSG, where once again, this is a heavyweight that has power. This is a heavyweight that has the technique to go behind it, has shown very good glimpses of wrestling takedown defense. Why is he a plus 450 underdog? I understand the time. I understand the time off and the age. However, this is skill set versus skill set wise. It's a very close fight, and I think it's a lot closer if you think about the skill sets of Miocic. Overall, Stipe Miocic has redefined the heavyweight division as it is. We're seeing it with guys like Cyril Gane, guys like Tom Aspinall, where we are looking at these 240, 250, 265, some of them are 265, where MMA fighters, they're not just blobs looking for a knockout. They're guys that are actually willing to make the reads, understand what is going on, and put on polished performances. Guys who actually train in the gym, and I think a lot of that has to do with the guys from Stipe's era and Stipe in general. He has redefined heavyweight as it is because of how good he was. When you're looking at this fight skill set for skill set, Jon Jones has also not looked that great either. He has fought Cyril Gane. That fight kind of felt like a fluke, and before that, he was having a difficult fight with Dominic Reyes, had a difficult fight with Thiago Santos. I'm not going to say be the Jon Jones hater, but I don't think it is as great of a resume than guys like GSP and Demetrius Johnson. He fought a lot of guys that were supposed to be middleweights in my opinion. But let's not talk about the skill set of Jon Jones like it's not the greatest I have ever seen. It is the GOAT. He is a part of the Mount Rushmore of UFC in terms of just pure skill sets. I'm not sitting here saying that Stipe is going to win, but I am sitting here saying I'm sprinkling a little bit on Stipe Miocic. But look back at how good Stipe was. 3 title defenses, the most in heavyweight history, polished boxing, great takedown defense, cardio in the heavyweight division against a guy who, listen, he is the GOAT. He also hasn't really looked the greatest in a heavyweight division. I'm gonna leave it at that. If you guys think I'm delusional, let me know in the comments. If you guys think that I am going to, hit jackpot and be the guy that called it, let me know in the comments. I would love to see all the reactions. I would love to see everything. Let me know what you guys want to see next as well. I'm willing to do anything. Anyways, it's been Santi. It's been Studs.